For 10 years, Victoria and Michael Connolly had built a fortress of a life, brick by perfect brick. A sprawling home in the suburbs of Denver, 2 successful careers, and a love story that their friends envied. But a fortress is only as strong as its foundation, and theirs was about to be shattered by a secret. It wasn't just another woman. It was the weapon she wielded. A positive pregnancy test waved like a flag of victory, meant to tear everything down. But in a war of hearts and futures, the most powerful truths are often the last to be revealed, and one final test would prove who truly held the key to the future. Victoria Davenport. Connolly loved order. It was the foundation of her profession as an architect, and the principle by which she lived her life. Her world was a blueprint of clean lines, calculated angles, and structures built to last. Her marriage to Michael was meant to be her masterpiece, a decade-long project of shared dreams and quiet compromises. Their home, a modern marvel of glass and cedar that she had designed herself, overlooked the rolling foothills of Colorado. It was a testament to their success, a sanctuary of muted colors and organized calm. Lately, however, a subtle disorder had crept into the blueprint. It started with small deviations, hairline cracks in the facade. Michael, a charismatic and driven partner at a downtown investment firm, began working later. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually in his pocket screen, down. There was a new scent on his shirts, sometimes not the cloying perfume of a cheap affair, but something more insidious, a faint floral note that was distinctly not hers. Big merger on the horizon, he'd explain, running a hand through his sandy brown hair, his blue eyes not quite meeting hers. We're all burning the midnight oil, Vicky. Victoria, ever the pragmatist, wanted to believe him. Marriage, like any grand structure, required maintenance. It settled, it shifted, it endured external pressures. These were just stress fractures, she told herself, not foundational rot. Their most significant shared stress was the one they rarely spoke of anymore, the empty nursery on the 2nd floor. For 3 years they had navigated the emotionally brutal landscape of infertility. The clinical appointments, the timed injections, the crushing disappointment month after month. It had worn them down, creating a silent, hollow space between them that Michael's long hours now seemed to fill perfectly. Victoria had suggested they pause the treatments a few months ago to let their lives and their marriage breathe. Michael had agreed almost too quickly, a flicker of relief in his eyes that stung more than she cared to admit. The first tangible piece of evidence arrived on a Tuesday, tucked into the pocket of his suit jacket she was taking to the dry cleaners. It was a receipt from a hotel downtown, the kind of boutique place with rooftop bars and exorbitant cocktail prices. It wasn't a room charge, but a bar tab from the previous Friday. For $187. Paid at 11:48 p.m. He had told her he was working late on the merger, eating a sad desk salad. She stood in their walk-in closet, the receipt feeling like a shard of glass in her palm. Her breath hitched. The architect in her analyzed the data. The location, the time, the amount, it was a story, and she wasn't in it. She imagined him there, laughing, his hand resting on someone else's arm, the floral scent she'd noticed now taking on a name and a face in her mind. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she observed. She became a forensic analyst in her own home, studying the data of their life together. The credit card statements she now cross-referenced online showed a pattern of lunches at cozy bistros she'd never been to, and one recurring charge from a high-end lingerie store. A gift for her. No, her birthday had passed months ago, And their anniversary wasn't for weeks. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a blueprint of betrayal that was horrifying in its clarity. The breaking point came a week later. Michael was in the shower, and his phone, left for once on the bedside table, buzzed incessantly. It was a series of texts from a name she didn't recognize, Zoe Preston. Victoria's hands trembled, but a cold resolve settled over her. She wasn't just a wife. She was the designer of this life, and someone was trying to demolish it. She had to see the wrecking ball for herself. She unlocked the phone. His passcode was still their original anniversary, a pathetic irony that made her stomach churn. The messages were sickeningly familiar. Zoe, can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing. Zoe, are you going to tell her soon? You promised, Michael. Zoe, I have something important to tell you. Something that changes everything. Call me the second you can. The water in the bathroom shut off. Victoria quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the table, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The calm, orderly world she had so carefully constructed was gone. In its place was a chaotic, unstable structure, and she was standing right on the fault line as the ground began to shake. Michael walked out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, smiling at her. "Morning, Vicky," he said, oblivious. "Big day today." Victoria looked at the man she had loved for a decade, the man she had planned a future with, and saw only a stranger. "Yes," she said, her voice unnervingly steady. "I think it will be." The day unfolded in a haze of surreal calm for Victoria. She went to her office, reviewed blueprints for a new library, and spoke with contractors, her voice a perfect mask of professional composure. Inside, however, a storm was raging. The words from the text messages were seared into her mind. Something that changes everything. Each possibility was a fresh wave of nausea. She left work early, a rare occurrence. She needed to be on her own turf within the walls she had designed when the demolition began. She sat on the minimalist sofa in their living room, the late afternoon sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and waited. The silence of the house was deafening. Michael arrived home just after 6, his briefcase in one hand, his tie already loosened. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her sitting there, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. "Vicky, you're home early," he said, a note of caution in his voice. He tried for a smile, but it faltered. "Everything okay?" "I'd like you to tell me, Michael," she said, her voice low and even. "Is everything okay?" He set his briefcase down slowly, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "Tough day. The markets were a mess. You know how it is." "I don't mean work," Victoria continued, not moving a muscle. She held his gaze. "I'm talking about us, our life, this house." She gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "Is it still structurally sound?" A flicker of panic crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" "Of course it is. I found a receipt, Michael, from the Hotel Andaz, a bar tab for nearly $200 on a Friday night. You told me you were eating a salad at your desk." The blood drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The easy charisma he wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by the pathetic stammering of a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. "It was a client meeting. It went late. I didn't want to worry you." "A client meeting where you also bought lingerie?" She pressed her voice, gaining a sharp edge. "Was that a signing bonus?" He flinched as if struck. "Vicky, listen." "No, you listen," she said, finally standing up. She felt a tremor in her legs, but forced it to stop. I saw the texts, Michael, this morning, from Zoe Preston. The name hung in the air between them, acrid and ugly. Michael sank onto a nearby armchair, his head in his hands. The confession, when it came, was a pathetic torrent of clichés. It didn't mean anything. He was stressed. They had grown distant. It was a mistake. He loved her, Victoria, his wife. Zoe was just a distraction. A distraction. Victoria's laugh was a bitter, hollow sound. You built a second life behind my back, and you call it a distraction. Did you use my blueprints for that too? Or did you design this one all on your own? It's over, I swear, he pleaded. Looking up at her, his eyes filled with a desperate self-serving remorse. I'll end it tonight. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can start the treatments again. Whatever you want. The mention of the treatments was a low blow, and he knew it. He was trying to pivot back to their shared grief, their shared history, as if it could paper over the gaping hole he had just blown in their present. But it was the final text that still echoed in her mind. She said she had something important to tell you. Victoria stated, her voice dropping again. Something that changes everything. What is it, Michael? He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I don't know. I haven't spoken to her. It was a lie, a clumsy, obvious lie. Victoria could see it in the way he shifted his weight, the way he refused to look at her. He knew, or at least he had a terrible suspicion. The lie was worse than the affair itself. The affair was a betrayal of their past. The lie was a betrayal of their future, a sign that he was still protecting his other life, still keeping his options open. Get out, she said the words, feeling foreign on her tongue. What Vicky know? Let's talk about this. He stood up, reaching for her. No, she recoiled, pulling her arm back. I can't look at you. I don't want you in my house tonight. Go stay at a hotel. The Andas, perhaps. You seem to like it there. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. He knew he had lost this battle. He nodded slowly, grabbing his briefcase. At the door, he turned back, his face a mask of misery. I am so sorry, Vicky, he whispered. I'll fix this. She didn't answer. She just stood there, listening to the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway, the engine noise fading into the night. The perfect silence of her perfect home rushed back in. But it was different now. It was the silence of a tomb. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The foundation was utterly broken, and she had a horrifying feeling that the real earthquake was yet to come. For 2 days, Victoria existed in a state of suspended animation. Michael bombarded her with texts and voicemails, filled with frantic apologies and promises, all of which she ignored. She needed space. She needed to survey the damage and decide if anything was salvageable. She walked through her silent house, touching the cool marble of the countertops and the smooth wood of the floors, feeling like a ghost in her own life. Everything that had once brought her comfort now felt like a stage set for a play whose lead actor had abandoned the script. Her sister Lena, a no-nonsense family lawyer, came over with wine and a pragmatic fury that was in its own way comforting. You file for divorce tomorrow, Lena stated, pouring a generous glass of Sauvignon Blanc. We freeze the assets. We get a court order for him to stay away. We bleed him dry, Cat. It's the only language men like him understand. I don't know what I want to do yet, Victoria admitted, swirling the wine in her glass. I just need to think. Think about what he cheated. He lied. End of story. There's more, Victoria said quietly, and she told Lena about the final text message. Something that changes everything. Lena's legal mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. She's pregnant. The words spoken aloud landed with the force of a physical blow. Victoria squeezed her eyes shut. It was the one possibility she had been desperately pushing away, the one variable that could turn this demolition into a complete leveling of her world. Her answer came the next afternoon. She was sitting in her home office, trying to lose herself in the intricate details of a structural stress analysis, when the doorbell chimed. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the frosted glass panel of the front door, she could see the silhouette of a woman. Assuming it was a delivery, she opened it without checking the security camera. The woman standing on her porch was young, probably in her late 20s. She had long, dark hair, big brown eyes, and a confident, almost defiant posture. She was wearing a stylish trench coat unbuttoned to reveal a form-fitting dress. Victoria recognized the floral scent instantly. It was her. It was Zoe Preston. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria's mind raced. What was she doing here? This was a brazen, calculated move. This wasn't the act of a contrite mistress. This was the act of a usurper coming to inspect the castle she intended to conquer. "Victoria," Zoe asked, her voice smooth and polished. There was no apology in her tone, only a chilling sort of purpose. "What do you want?" Victoria's voice was ice. "I think we need to talk," Zoe said, taking a step forward as if she expected to be invited in. Victoria didn't move. "We have nothing to talk about. This is between me and my husband." A small, pitying smile played on Zoe's lips. "That's where you're wrong. It's about all three of us now. And soon it will be about 4. Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Lena's words echoed in her ears. "She's pregnant?" Zoe seemed to savor the moment of Victoria's horrified realization. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small white plastic stick. She held it up for Victoria to see. 2 stark pink lines were clearly visible in the results window. "I thought you should know," Zoe said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Michael is hesitant. He feels guilty, loyal. But a baby changes things. A baby is a future. He's going to be a father." Victoria stared at the pregnancy test, the symbol of everything she had yearned for and failed to achieve. And here it was, being wielded as a weapon against her by her husband's mistress on her own doorstep. The audacity was breathtaking. The cruelty was unimaginable. "Michael and I have been trying to have a baby for years." Victoria heard herself say the words, sounding distant and hollow. "I know," Zoe replied, and the simple statement was laden with a terrible intimacy. It meant Michael had shared their private fun with this woman. He had given her the softest, most vulnerable parts of their marriage to use as ammunition. "Maybe it just wasn't meant to be for you two." Zoe continued, her voice softening into a grotesque parody of compassion. "Sometimes life makes the decision for you. He belongs with me now, with his family." His family. The words were a declaration of war. Zoe Preston hadn't just come to inform Victoria. She had come to replace her. She was staking her claim not just on Michael, but on the very life Victoria had built. A primal anger, cold and pure, surged through Victoria, eclipsing the pain. She looked from the pregnancy test to Zoe's smug face. "You need to leave," Victoria said, her voice low and dangerous. "I'll go," Zoe said with a shrug, slipping the test back into her purse. "But you can't avoid this, Victoria. You're living in the past. I'm his future. You should probably get a good lawyer. Lena, is it? Michael told me she's very aggressive. With a final triumphant glance, Zoe turned and walked down the stone path, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm of victory. Victoria stood in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame so tightly her knuckles were white. She watched until Zoe's car disappeared down the street. The wrecking ball had struck. The dust and debris were all around her. Her marriage, her hopes for a family, her sense of security, all of it was rubble at her feet. But as she closed the door, a different feeling began to smolder beneath the shock. The architect in her, the builder, the planner, refused to be buried in the ruins. A demolition is also a clearing of the ground. It makes way for something new. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The days that followed Zoe's visit were a blur of rage and strategic thinking. The initial shock solidified into a hard, cold resolve. Victoria did not cry. She organized. She met with her sister Lena, not for comfort, but for counsel. So she's pregnant, Lena said, her pen tapping a sharp rhythm on a yellow legal pad. This complicates the divorce proceedings, but it doesn't change the fundamentals. Adultery is adultery. The child, if it's his, will be a financial obligation. That's it. If it's his, Victoria repeated the words, tasting like poison. We'll demand a paternity test the second the child is born. It's standard procedure. But Victoria knew this wasn't about standard procedure. It was about Michael. He was now caught in a pincer movement between his guilt-ridden past and a seemingly inevitable future. He called her, his voice hoarse with desperation. "Vicky, please, just talk to me. We need to figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "She came to the house, Michael. She showed me the test. Did you know she was going to do that?" A pause on the other end of the line. "No, of course not. I would never. Vicky, I'm so sorry. She's scared." "She didn't seem scared," Victoria retorted. She seemed triumphant. He sighed a heavy, weary sound. "Look, it's a mess. I know I created this mess. But a baby. My God, Vicky, a baby. After everything we went through." The cruelty of his statement, whether intentional or not, was staggering. He was using their shared pain as a bridge to his new life. He was asking for her understanding, her sympathy, even in a situation born of his betrayal. "So what is your plan?" she asked, cutting through his self-pity. "Do you intend to leave me and start a new life with Zoe and your child?" I don't know," he stammered. "I love you. I don't want to lose you. But I can't abandon my own child." He was trying to have it all, her forgiveness and his new family. He wanted Victoria to absorb the blow, to graciously step aside, or even more absurdly, to somehow incorporate this new reality into their lives. The architect in her saw the fatal flaw in his design. It was an impossible structure, doomed to collapse. "Here is what's going to happen," Victoria said, her tone shifting from that of a wounded wife to a project manager laying down non-negotiable terms. "I am not making any decisions based on her word. I've seen a plastic stick, Michael. That is not proof of anything. It's real Vicky. I've been to a doctor's appointment with her." "Have you?" Victoria asked coolly. "Or did she just tell you she went? Did you see the doctor? Did you see a report with her name and a positive result on it?" He hesitated. "Well, no. I waited in the waiting room. She said she didn't want me in there for the first one. She showed me the ultrasound picture on her phone later. A tiny red flag, almost imperceptible, went up in Victoria's mind. It was nothing, just a flicker of doubt. But it was there. "This is my ultimatum," she said, her voice firm. "I will not be bullied out of my own life by a dramatic announcement. You will tell her that nothing, absolutely nothing, is decided until that baby is born and a paternity test is performed. A legal court-ordered DNA test that I will have my lawyer oversee." "That's months away," Michael protested. "What are we supposed to do until then?" "You are supposed to figure out who you are, Michael." "I am going to live my life. I'm filing for legal separation to protect my assets. You can live wherever you want, but you will not live here. You can see her. You can support her emotionally, but our marriage is on ice, effective immediately. We are in a holding pattern until we have a verified fact. The fact of paternity. Do you understand?" It was a brilliant move, and Lena had helped her craft it. It wasn't an emotional plea to be chosen. It was a logical, strategic delay. It took the power away from Zoe's announcement and placed it on a future, verifiable event. It forced Michael out of the immediate emotional chaos and into a prolonged state of uncertainty, a place he detested. "Vicky, please don't do this," he begged. "It's already done," she said. "I've given you the terms. The only thing you have to decide is whether you agree to them." She could hear the conflict in his silence. He was trapped. To refuse was to show his hand to fully align with Zoe and abandon any hope of reconciliation with Victoria. To agree was to put Zoe and their supposed future on hold, to live in limbo for the better part of a year. He chose the coward's path, the one that kept all his options on the table. "Okay." He conceded, his voice heavy with defeat. "Okay, Vicky. Your terms." After she hung up the phone, Victoria walked to the window and looked out at the mountains. She had stalled the demolition. She had bought herself time. But as she stood there, the little red flag in her mind began to wave more insistently. He waited in the waiting room. She showed him a picture on her phone. An architect doesn't just look at a finished building. They scrutinize the plans. And something about Zoe's blueprint was starting to feel off. A nagging sense of doubt began to take root. What if the foundation of Zoe's entire story was just as rotten as her own marriage had been? The weeks that followed settled into a strange, tense new normal. Michael moved into a furnished corporate apartment downtown, a sterile purgatory between his two lives. He and Victoria communicated only through brief, functional texts about bills or mail. Meanwhile, Victoria began the methodical process of untangling her life from his, guided by Lena's expert legal advice. But her mind was not on the divorce. It was consumed by a new project, a forensic investigation into Zoe Preston. It began as a way to reclaim a sense of control, but it quickly morphed into a full-blown obsession. The architect who built her life on facts and precision could not accept the flimsy evidence presented to her. She needed to see the load-bearing walls of Zoe's story for herself. Her first step was social media. Zoe's profiles were mostly private, but Victoria's resourceful younger cousin, a social media prodigy, found a way in through a friend of a friend. Zoe's online persona was a curated masterpiece of a vibrant, aspirational life. Posts about brunch with friends, gallery openings, and weekend trips to Aspen. Then, about a week after her confrontation with Victoria, the pregnancy posts began. They were subtle at first. A picture of a book on motherhood captioned, "Doing some light reading." A photo of her hand on her flat stomach with the caption, Big changes coming soon. #blessed. There were no direct announcements, just a carefully crafted trail of breadcrumbs for her followers. Victoria, with her eye for detail, started noticing inconsistencies. In one post, Zoe complained about intense morning sickness. A week later, she posted a photo of herself enjoying a wine-tasting tour with friends, a glass of rosé clearly visible in her hand. When a commenter asked about it, Zoe replied with a breezy, "Oh, it was just a tiny sip for the photo op, doctor's orders." It was plausible, but it felt careless. Then came the ultrasound. Zoe posted a grainy black-and-white photo, the classic first glimpse of a developing fetus. The caption was effusive. "Met our little peanut today. Already so in love. My heart could just burst." The comments flooded in with congratulations. Michael's own sister, oblivious to the drama, had even liked the post. Victoria stared at the image, her heart giving a painful lurch. This was the picture Michael had mentioned. She felt a familiar pang of loss, quickly followed by a cold, analytical curiosity. She saved the image to her desktop and, on a hunch, performed a reverse image search. For a few minutes there was nothing. Then the results began to populate. Her breath caught in her throat. The exact same ultrasound photo appeared on dozens of sites. It was on Pinterest boards for pregnancy announcements, on parenting blogs, and even on the websites of companies that sold fake pregnancy tests and ultrasounds for pranks, or more sinisterly, for deception. It was a stock photo, a generic downloadable image of a stranger's baby. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her mind reeling. It wasn't proof of anything definitive. Zoe could have lost the original image and downloaded a similar-looking one to post. But coupled with the other inconsistencies, it was a significant crack in the facade. Driven by this new discovery, Victoria took a bolder step. She hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by Lena. His name was Paul, a former cop with a weary face and intelligent eyes. "What am I looking for?" Paul asked during their first meeting in a quiet coffee shop. "I'm not sure," Victoria admitted. "The woman, Zoe Preston, claims she's pregnant with my husband's child. But something feels wrong. I want to know about her life, her history. Is she who she says she is? And most importantly, I need to know if she is actually pregnant." Paul nodded, taking notes. "It's not my usual kind of case, but I can do a full workup. Financials, employment, history, surveillance. If she's faking a pregnancy, there will be signs. People who fake it get sloppy. They forget which lie they told to which person. They don't go to doctor's appointments. We'll find out." The first report from Paul came a week later. It was a dossier of Zoe's life. She worked as a marketing manager at a tech startup. She had a mountain of debt, student loans, credit cards, a car payment she was behind on. Her job was stable, but her salary was nowhere near enough to support the lavish lifestyle she projected online. She wasn't an heiress or from a wealthy family. She was a woman living far beyond her means, likely funded by the gifts and cash Michael had been giving her. She wasn't just a mistress. She was an opportunist. The second report, a week after that, contained the bombshell. Paul had followed Zoe for several days. She did not visit any OB/GYN clinics. She did, however, make regular visits to a CrossFit gym, where, according to a source Paul had inside, she participated in high-intensity workouts, the kind most doctors would strongly advise against during the first trimester of a pregnancy. Even more damning, she was seen on multiple evenings, drinking cocktails with friends at a downtown bar, long after any photo-op excuse would hold water. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that made Victoria's blood run cold, was a detail about Zoe's past. 5 years prior, an ex-boyfriend had filed a restraining order against her. In the court documents, he alleged that after he broke up with her, she had faked a pregnancy to try and trap him into staying with her, a lie that was exposed when his mother, a nurse, became suspicious. Victoria stared at the scanned copy of the court filing on her laptop screen. It was a pattern, a premeditated, calculated, sociopathic pattern of behavior. Zoe wasn't just lying. She was a predator, and Michael, in his weakness and vanity, had led her right to their door. The pregnancy test she had brandished wasn't a weapon of circumstance. It was part of a carefully designed strategy. A strategy to demolish Victoria's life and build her own upon the ruins. Victoria closed the laptop. The time for waiting was over. The time for surveillance and suspicion was over. She now had the blueprints to Zoe's entire fraudulent construction. It was time to bring the whole thing crashing down. The final report from Paul, the private investigator, arrived in a sealed manila envelope. Victoria sat at her wide oak desk, the evening light casting long shadows across the room, and read the damning words detailing Zoe's history of deceit. It wasn't a single crack in the facade. It was a comprehensive structural failure. The entire edifice of Zoe's story was built on a foundation of lies. A cold, clarifying anger settled over Victoria, displacing the last vestiges of grief. This was no longer just a personal betrayal. It was a calculated fraud, an invasion. The time for passive observation was over. The time for demolition had come. She picked up her phone, her movements deliberate, and dialed Michael's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Vicky. Is everything okay?" "I'm ready to talk," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth, as cool and polished as the marble countertops in her kitchen. "We are going to resolve this, all 3 of us. I want you to bring Zoe to the house tomorrow evening at 7. A panicked stammer came from the other end of the line. "What, here together?" "Vicky. I don't think that's a good idea. That's just asking for a disaster. It will be too emotional. Emotion is no longer part of this equation." "Michael." She cut him off, her tone leaving no room for debate. "This is now a matter of facts. My home provides a controlled environment where we can review those facts. This is not a request. If you refuse, I will immediately instruct Lena to proceed with the divorce on the most aggressive terms possible. And the information I now possess will be submitted as evidence. I can't predict the fallout, but I doubt your firm's partners would appreciate this kind of publicity." 7 o'clock. "Don't be late." She hung up, the click of the call ending echoing the finality in her voice. She had laid the trap, and she knew he would walk into it. He was too desperate to keep his options open, too terrified of losing everything to defy a direct order. The next day, Victoria prepared for the meeting with the meticulous precision of an architect preparing for a final project presentation. She moved through her home not as a resident, but as a strategist. She adjusted the lighting in the living room to be bright and clinical, eliminating any soft, forgiving shadows. She set out 3 glasses and a single pitcher of ice water on the coffee table, a deliberate, sterile arrangement. She reviewed the contents of the folder Paul had prepared, each document a carefully placed explosive charge. Finally, she went upstairs to dress. She chose a simple, severe black sheath dress. It wasn't armor against pain. She was past that. It was a uniform. It projected authority control and the somber finality of the occasion. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not a grieving wife, but a woman who had taken back control of her own narrative. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the familiar chime of the doorbell echoed through the quiet house. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she walked to the door and opened it. They stood on her porch, a grotesque parody of a couple. Michael was pale, his eyes darting nervously, radiating an aura of profound misery. Beside him, Zoe was a vision of defiant confidence. She wore an expensive-looking cream-colored dress that was just tight enough to hint at a curve that wasn't there. Her hand was placed high on her stomach in a gesture of maternal protection that was so theatrical it was nauseating. Her eyes, however, held a triumphant glint. She believed she had already won. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said, her voice a placid surface over a sea of cold resolve. She stepped aside. "Please come in." She led them to the living room, the stage she had so carefully set. Michael sank into the sofa, as if his legs could no longer support him, but Zoe sat forward, perched on the edge of the cushion, like a predator ready to pounce. So Zoe began, unable to resist taking the lead. Her voice was syrupy with false magnanimity. "Have you finally decided to accept reality, Victoria? I'm glad. It's so much better for everyone, especially the baby, if we can handle this transition, like adults." Victoria let the condescending words hang in the air, allowing the silence to stretch uncomfortably. Then she leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Zoe's. "I've done more than accept reality, Zoe. I've investigated it." She picked up the file from the seat beside her and placed it on the coffee table with a soft, definitive thud. "Michael, you told me you saw an ultrasound picture on Zoe's phone. A first glimpse of your peanut. Was it this one?" She slid a glossy 8x10 print of the stock photo across the table. Michael squinted at it. "Yes, I think so. That's it." Zoe's smug smile tightened at the edges. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "This," Victoria said, "is a stock photograph. It's on Pinterest, it's on parenting blogs, it's on websites that sell gag gifts. It is available to anyone with an internet connection. It is not your baby Zoe. It is not a real ultrasound." "That's ridiculous," Zoe scoffed, attempting a laugh that came out as a brittle bark. "My doctor must have sent me a sample image file by mistake. The machine at the clinic is old. It's a simple mix-up." "A mix-up," Victoria repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Like the mix-up on your Instagram, where you complained of debilitating morning sickness 1 week and were then pictured enjoying a wine-tasting tour the next." She slid the printouts of the social media posts across the table. "I was holding the glass for a friend." For the picture, Zoe insisted, her voice rising. She turned to Michael, her eyes wide with feigned indignation. "Can you believe this? She's been stalking my social media." "Michael, it's pathetic." Michael looked from the photos to Zoe, a seed of doubt finally taking root in his panicked eyes. "Zoe, just explain." "I don't have to explain anything," she snapped before turning back to Victoria. "You're obsessed." "My investigation was far more thorough than Instagram." Victoria continued, her calm voice slicing through Zoe's rising hysteria. She placed the PI's neatly typed report onto the growing pile of evidence. "According to this, you haven't visited an OB/GYN clinic once in the past month. You have, however, maintained your membership at a CrossFit gym, participating in workouts that would be considered high risk. You've also been seen drinking cocktails at the Green Russell on at least 2 separate occasions. My investigator has time-stamped photos. The blood drained from Zoe's face. She again whirled on Michael, her strategy shifting from denial to outrage. She had me followed. Your wife had a man follow me. Michael, this is insane. She's unhinged. You need to do something. But Michael wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at the report, at the black and white proof of a life that showed no signs of pregnancy. He physically recoiled from Zoe on the couch, the space between them suddenly a gaping chasm. Victoria let the weight of the surveillance report settle before she delivered the final blow. She slid a scanned legal document to the top of the pile. And then there is the question of character. This is a copy of a restraining order filed 5 years ago by your ex-boyfriend, a Mr. Kevin Novak. In his sworn statement, he alleges that you faked a pregnancy to manipulate him into staying with you. It seems you have a history of making this particular mix-up. The room fell into a dead, suffocating silence. The evidence was all there, a mountain of methodical truth. Zoe was exposed, stripped bare of all her lies. The confident usurper had vanished, replaced by a cornered, frantic fraud. Zoe, tell me this isn't true. Michael whispered, his voice cracking with the agony of his own monumental foolishness. Zoe's head snapped toward Victoria, her face a twisted mask of pure hatred. The game was over. She had nothing left to lose. You think you've won, don't you? She spat, her voice venomous. You think you've been so clever. You get to keep your perfect house and your pathetic, cheating husband. You think you get to keep your perfect little life. This was never about winning him back, Victoria said, her voice filled not with triumph, but with a deep, weary sadness. It was about revealing the truth. Because the truth is the only thing a future can be built on. And speaking of the future, there's one more piece of the truth you both need to know. With a slow, deliberate movement, she reached into her purse. She didn't pull out another document or another photograph. She pulled out a small, white plastic object and placed it on the table separate from the pile of lies. It was a digital pregnancy test. On its small screen, 2 words glowed clear and irrefutable. Pregnant, 2 to 3 weeks. The gasp that ripped from Michael's throat was a raw, ragged sound. Zoe stared, her jaw slack, her eyes wide with utter uncomprehending disbelief. The architect of a fictional future was face to face with a real one she could never have predicted. I was feeling tired. I thought it was stress. Victoria stated, her voice quiet but firm in the ringing silence. My doctor confirmed it yesterday. It seems that one of our last attempts before we paused the treatments finally worked. A bit of a delayed miracle. The finality of it broke Zoe completely. Her carefully constructed world had not just been exposed. It had been obliterated by a truth more powerful than any of her lies. A choked sob escaped her lips. She fumbled for her purse, knocking over her untouched glass of water, and scrambled for the door, fleeing the scene of her own humiliation. The slam of the front door echoed like a gunshot. Michael remained frozen, his gaze locked on the glowing screen of the test. He looked up at Victoria, his eyes swimming with a desperate, pathetic cocktail of awe, horror, and a sudden, insane hope. Vicky, he began, his voice a broken plea. A baby. Our baby. Victoria met his gaze, and the vast, empty distance between them was now uncrossable. She took a single step back, severing the last invisible thread that connected them. Yes, she said, her voice soft, but as final as a signed decree. My baby. My future. And it's a future you will have no part in designing. In the deafening silence that followed Zoe's chaotic exit and Michael's shattered departure, the house seemed to exhale. Victoria stood motionless in the center of the living room, her eyes fixed on the small digital screen of her pregnancy test, a beacon of truth amidst the wreckage. The adrenaline that had sharpened her senses and steadied her voice began to recede, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness in its wake. She didn't feel victorious. She felt hollowed out, as if she had just supervised the controlled demolition of her own life's work. The air was thick with the dust of 10 years of shared memories, now tainted and fractured. She walked over to the coffee table, gathered the printouts of Zoe's lies, and dropped them into the recycling bin. She left her pregnancy test on the mantelpiece, a solitary, powerful statement of fact. The first email from Michael arrived before dawn. It was a chaotic torrent of self-loathing and panic. I am a fool. A monster, the worst man on earth. I threw away everything for a lie. Vicky, I know you can never forgive me. I don't deserve it. But please don't shut me out. She read it, her face impassive, and then deleted it. More followed, each one a different strategy. There was the nostalgic plea referencing their first apartment and their wedding day. There was the desperate bargain, promising her anything therapy, a new start, a life dedicated solely to her happiness. Then, as the reality of her pregnancy settled in his mind, the tone shifted. The emails began to focus on them, on their baby. This is a sign, Vicky. It has to be one read. After all the pain, all the doctors, all the disappointment. For it to happen now, it's a miracle. Fate is giving us a second chance, a reason to rebuild. For our child. He was trying to use their baby as a bridge back to her, a biological lifeline to pull himself from the abyss of his own making. Each email was a blueprint for a reconciliation she knew was structurally impossible. He didn't understand. The baby wasn't a repair kit for their broken marriage. It was the cornerstone of her new independent life. Lena saw the emails and her legal mind took over. This is emotional manipulation, Kat. He's trying to leverage the child before it's even born. Don't reply. Let me handle all communication. Victoria agreed, but she knew one final conversation was necessary. Not for him, but for her. She needed to draw the final indelible line on the blueprint of her future. She agreed to meet him at a quiet, neutral cafe, a place with no shared history to ghosts in the corners. He was already there when she arrived, looking gaunt and diminished. The confident charisma that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. He stood up as she approached his hands, fidgeting with a napkin. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "I have 20 minutes, Michael," she replied, not unkindly but firmly. She didn't sit down. She wanted this to be clear. This was not a negotiation. It was a briefing. "I will never ask for your forgiveness, Vicky, because I don't deserve it," he began, the words sounding rehearsed. "But I am asking for a chance to be a father to our child." "You will be," Victoria said, her voice calm and resolute. It was the same line she had practiced in her head, and it felt right. "There is no question about that. This child deserves a father." A wave of relief washed over his face, but it was premature. He saw an opening, a path back, and a chance for us to be a family. People make mistakes, Vicky. Horrible, unforgivable mistakes. But this baby, it's a miracle. After everything we went through. Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't that mean we're meant to fight for this? Victoria looked at him, at the man she had loved for a decade and felt a profound sense of sorrow for the person he could have been. What it means is that we created a life, Michael. It's a beautiful, miraculous thing, and I will be grateful for it every day. But it doesn't erase your choices. A miracle doesn't absolve you. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping but gaining intensity. Trust is the foundation of a marriage, Michael. It's the primary load-bearing wall. And you didn't just put a crack in it. You took a sledgehammer to it repeatedly, and then you invited a stranger to help you knock it down. You were ready to abandon me and our entire history for a fiction. You can't rebuild a skyscraper on a sinkhole. She saw the fight drain out of him, the last flicker of hope dying in his eyes as her words landed. He finally understood. My child, she continued, her voice softening, deserves to be raised in a home built on truth, stability, and respect, not on the rubble of betrayal. We will co-parent. We will be civil. You will be his or her father. But you will not be my husband. That is the final word. He finally nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Okay, Vicky. I understand. Lena handled the divorce with the swift, merciless efficiency of a surgeon. Stripped of any moral high ground, Michael agreed to all of Victoria's terms. The house her design and her sanctuary was hers. Her financial security was ensured. The legal ties that had bound them for a decade were severed with the stroke of a pen. As the seasons changed, so did the architecture of Victoria's life. The sprawling house, once a monument to a shared dream, slowly became her own. She threw herself into her work with renewed passion, designing structures that were innovative, strong, and filled with light. Her belly grew a constant, gentle reminder of the future taking shape within her. The empty nursery, for so long a symbol of grief, became her favorite project. She didn't paint it blue or pink, but a soft, optimistic yellow, the color of sunlight. With Lena's help, she assembled the crib, her own 2 hands building the safe, sturdy frame where her child would sleep. Her friends, who had given her space during the worst of the turmoil, now filled her home with warmth and laughter. They threw her a baby shower in the backyard, and surrounded by their genuine love. Victoria realized she was building a new kind of family, one founded not on a legal contract, but on unwavering loyalty and true affection. One crisp autumn afternoon, she stood in the completed nursery, organizing tiny clothes in a dresser. The late sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the room. She looked out at the fountains, their peaks resolute against the clear sky, and felt the baby kick a sudden, definitive flutter. She gasped, then laughed, placing a hand on her stomach. It was a real, tangible connection to the new life she was now responsible for. She thought of the 2 pregnancy tests. One, a cheap piece of plastic, a mass-produced lie brandished as a weapon to destroy. The other, a quiet, astonishing truth that had arrived not as a prize in a war, but as a compass pointing her toward a new beginning. She had lost a husband, but she had found her purpose. The demolition was complete. The ground had been cleared. Now, standing strong and serene in the life she was designing for herself, she was ready for the most important, groundbreaking of all. Victoria's story is a powerful reminder that the truth always finds a way to surface, often in the most unexpected ways. It shows us that in the face of deep betrayal, true strength isn't about fighting to hold on to what's broken, but about having the courage to build something new from the ground up. She thought her future was tied to a man and a marriage. But the real test proved that her future was, and always had been, within herself. Her journey from a heartbroken wife to a powerful, independent mother is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. What would you have done in Victoria's situation? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like that, even with a child involved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and powerful stories. Thank you for listening.